The system primes you to fear kinetic threats. You are shown an RQ-170 Sentinel drone returning from operations over Venezuela, and you are conditioned to see this as the apex of power. This is a deliberate misdirection. The high kinetic cost of direct conflict is now a liability, a crude vector for legacy powers. The real vector is silent. The math is irrefutable. According to USI, the entire global financial and military command and control system transits through a few dozen undersea cables. This is not a military vulnerability. It is a systemic choke point. The strategic objective is no longer a missile strike. It is a clean, digital severance. This is the blind Leviathan protocol. A state actor is not destroyed. It is informationally isolated. Its satellites are blinded. Its connection to global liquidity is severed. Threat actors already turn legitimate businesses into malware hosts, as documented by cyber press. Now scale that to the nation-state level. You create a solvent power one day, and a panicked, isolated entity the next, unable to see, unable to trade, unable to trust its own data. It is left alive, but its eyes are removed. The pivot to asymmetric warfare is not a choice. It is a mathematical function of state insolvency. A full-spectrum kinetic conflict against a peer adversary is a solvency death sentence. The cost per unit of projecting conventional power, aircraft carriers, stealth platforms, expeditionary brigades, has exceeded the liquidity of even major state actors. The objective is to cripple an adversary, not to bankrupt oneself in the process. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS assess that a prolonged, high-intensity kinetic campaign becomes the primary domestic liability for a state like Russia. An unpopular war drains the treasury and redirects capital from internal stability, creating an accelerant for civil unrest. We see this blueprint repeated. Reports from Bangui News confirm protests and strikes erupting in Iran, driven directly by inflation and currency devaluation, the predictable outcomes of economic warfare and unsustainable state expenditure. The state is forced to fight insolvency at home and an adversary abroad. It's a zero-sum equation. This weakness forces a pivot. When the kinetic cost is too high, the only rational vector is asymmetric. As documented by cyber press, threat actors are weaponizing legitimate businesses, turning them into malware hosts using info stealers. This is not random criminality. It is a low-cost, high-impact protocol for systemic economic degradation. You achieve the strategic objective, degrading a rival's economic foundation, without firing a single shot and with plausible deniability. This is the solvency crisis. The shift to cyber and economic destabilization is not a sign of strength or novel strategy. It is the tactical symptom of a terminal diagnosis, the inability to afford conventional war. This economic fragility is the core liability, forcing states onto an asymmetric path where the cost of entry is low, but the potential for uncontrolled escalation is a mathematical certainty. The core of this new warfare is a mathematical equation of economic attrition. A recent RUSI analysis presents the stark reality. A single main battle tank, a legacy kinetic asset, represents an investment of approximately $5 million. The weapon neutralizing it is a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a 10-to-1 or 100-to-1 cost asymmetry. It is a 10,000-to-1 leverage ratio. An adversary can afford to lose 9,999 drones for every single tank they liquidate. The math is irrefutable. This isn't a battle. It's a fiscal bleed-out engineered to bankrupt a state's war-making capacity. This economic inversion creates what military strategists term the democratization of violence. The monopoly on projecting decisive, lethal force, once held exclusively by nation-states with vast industrial bases, has been shattered. The barrier to entry is no longer a billion-dollar defense budget. It is an internet connection and a credit card. Small non-state actors or state proxies operating with plausible deniability can now inflict strategic-level losses on a superpower. They leverage cheap, disposable technology to systematically dismantle expensive legacy platforms, turning an enemy's strength into a terminal economic liability. The objective is not just asset liquidation on the battlefield. It is to trigger a systemic solvency crisis back home. Every destroyed tank is a multi-million-dollar write-down on the national balance sheet. Multiplied by hundreds, this pressure forces a government to either print currency, triggering hyperinflation and social unrest like that seen in Iran, or to divert funds from essential services, creating internal political fractures. The drone is merely the trigger. The weapon is the target's own economic fragility. By mathematically lowering a rival's solvency, you systemically lower their threshold for using the only leverage they have left, their nuclear arsenal. The primary battlefield is no longer geographic. It is a systemic layer we call the gray zone. This is the operational theater where the kinetic cost of invasion is deemed unacceptable. State actors now project power not with carrier groups, but with asymmetric vectors. Reports of a U.S. RQ-170 stealth drone operating over Venezuela are not a precursor to a conventional war. This asset is a data collection platform, mapping the network infrastructure required to deploy the actual weapons, economic, and cyber payloads. These payloads are designed to engineer a solvency crisis. Observe the blueprint in Iran. Widespread protests and strikes are not random events. They are the predictable outcome of engineered inflation and currency devaluation. This is the intended result of sustained economic pressure to turn the population against its own government, creating internal paralysis. The objective is to dismantle a state's internal cohesion without deploying a single soldier, turning economic liability into a strategic weapon. The cyber vector serves as the accelerant. According to cyber defense analysts, threat actors now systematically use info-stealers to turn a target nation's own legitimate businesses into malware hosts. This isn't simple espionage. It is the pre-staging of digital explosives within the core of a rival's economy. The system is hollowed out from within, its commerce becoming a vector for its own collapse. This is the protocol. Do not mistake regional instability in nations like Canada or South Africa as the central conflict. Per CSIS analysis, these zones function as proxy laboratories. They are controlled environments for testing and refining these social and economic destabilization protocols before they are deployed against primary adversaries. They are symptoms of the strategy, not the cause. Live fire drills for a new form of systemic warfare, designed to push rivals toward a mathematical threshold where insolvency becomes an existential threat, triggering launch-on-warning protocols. The nuclear protocol is not emotional. It is a mathematical calculation of survival. The launch-on-warning doctrine is the system's final defense. It dictates that if a state detects an incoming nuclear strike, it must launch its own arsenal before the inbound warhead's impact. There is no time for a committee meeting. The window is minutes. Now, introduce the asymmetric vector. A cyber attack, engineered by threat actors as detailed by cyberpress, is not aimed at legitimate businesses, but at the nation's early warning system. The radar goes blind. The satellites return garbage data. This is the fog of digital war. For the commander in the bunker, the data is ambiguous. Is it a system malfunction, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike? Analysts at CSEs confirm the protocol is unforgiving. A blinded system is interpreted as a hostile act. The doctrine does not permit the luxury of waiting to see if your cities are still there. This creates the terminal liability. For a nation already experiencing a solvency crisis, like the currency devaluation and protests documented in Iran, the calculation shifts. Economic weakness, compounded by perceived military pressure from assets like the RQ-170 drone, lowers the threshold for miscalculation. In a state of digital blindness, fear forces the commander's hand. The mathematical certainty is that the cost of inaction is existential. The protocol is forced to assume the worst, turning a digital ghost into a kinetic reality for the entire global system. The calibration shot will occur within 12 months. Expect a targeted, non-kinetic shutdown of a critical U.S. port's refrigerated container terminal, likely Los Angeles or Long Beach. The event will be timed to coincide with peak seasonal cargo flow. The vector will be a zero-day exploit delivered via an infostealer, which, according to CSS analysis, has already compromised legitimate, third-party customs and logistics software. The malware is designed to corrupt scheduling and temperature control data simultaneously, then erase itself. This is an asymmetric test of economic resilience. The objective is not destruction, but data collection. To measure the precise dollar value damage per hour, the failure cascade in the supply chain, and the political response latency. It field tests the blueprint for dismantling state solvency without a single kinetic strike. Attribution will be declared impossible. The event will be framed as a catastrophic, but ultimately technical, system failure. No state actor will claim it. None will need to. The mathematical proof of vulnerability is the entire message.